All right. Hi, everyone. And we are just seeing people come in now. So welcome. We are running a couple minutes late here, but we're going to wait a couple of minutes as people come in, and then we'll go ahead and kick this off. Um, I'm excited to talk with Shir Yehoshua, who is going to talk with us about engineering, best practices, team management, hiring, etc., and especially in this day and age with AI. So this should be a great session. Before we do that, in the beginning, we're going to do some quick intros so that you can get a sense of who she is, why we're talking about this, etc. And lastly, as we go into the content, and perhaps most importantly, think about questions you may want to ask her. This is meant to be interactive and tactical. So if you have particular burning questions you want her advice on, this is the time to get it done. In fact, we only have content for, about 20 minutes or so. So this is largely going to be Q&A. We have found this works the best with our webinars. So why don't we go ahead and get going? Hi, Shir.
Hello. Glad to
Um,
be here. Thanks for having
Welcome.
me.
Yeah, thank you for coming. So Shira, you have had a wealth of experiences currently at Notion leading engineering teams. But why don't we go ahead and can you talk a little bit about your career and background and I'll do a quick intro afterwards and then we'll dig into the meat of this
Sure,
session.
sure. Yeah, so I maybe like started my career. I joined this kind of small incubating team at Google working on trying to integrate speech recognition into search, which eventually became the Google Assistant. And I just thought it was like a really cool and exciting space. I wanted to build a computer you could talk to. Um, and so that's kind of where I cut my teeth as an engineer. And then eventually, similar thing. I thought self-driving cars were really, really cool. It'd be awesome to get a robot that drives. So I joined Waymo, spent another few years there. That's where I became a manager for the first time. Um, and then joined Notion. I wanted to learn how to build a really great product, and I thought that Notion was just a really nice product, well crafted. Um, and then after being at Notion for about a year, GPT-4 came out, and everything changed in the most exciting ways. And so we created a small AI team here, and that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years.
Awesome. Thank you, Sharon. Hi, everyone. I'm one of the co-founders and general partner at Hustle Fund. We invest in very early stage startups, pre-seed. We're basically like institutionalized friends and family, the rich uncle or aunt you may or may not have had. So we're going to talk a bit about a bunch of topics today in how Sheer leads her engineering teams, etc. Let's start actually with hiring because that's where it all begins, right? Can you talk a little bit about how do you even hire somebody? I think many people on this call may never have even hired an engineer and they're thinking about doing so for their startups.
Yeah. Um, so I think there's kind of a couple different things to think about for hiring. The first is what's the actual role that you need filled? And I've seen two kinds of mistakes, and I've made two kinds of mistakes for the role definition. One is being overly specific in a way that means that you'll never find someone. And the other mistake I've made is being overly vague, where you are just like, oh, I just want someone smart. And you hire them and then you don't actually have something for them to do with the right amount of specificity. So like making sure that you're thinking at the right altitude there. Um, Once you know the kind of role that you need or what skills gaps that you need to fill, well then that's where like the hard work comes in of trying to find the person. Now, I've been really, really lucky that I've mostly been at larger companies that have recruiting structures, and I think it's a lot harder if you're trying to do it all on your own. Um, but even then, a lot of the hires that I've made are just like people in my network, people I've met at events like these. You can tell a lot by a person, just by how they talk. And then the third part is figuring out if they have the skills that you need, and that's where I think one of the most important things that I overlooked earlier in my hiring journey, I only focused on do they have the skills that they need, and I didn't focus on can they learn the right ways. And I think again and again, I'd so much rather have somebody that can learn but doesn't have the skills, because then they'll be curious and be a lot more effective in the long run than somebody who has maybe more skills than another person but just has no agency or motivation to learn. So I always pick the growth mindset.
And how do you test for that? Is
Yeah.
that like interview questions? Do you do tests or projects?
Yeah. Uh, like peeking behind the covers now, if I ever interview any of you, you'll be prepared.
We're all
But
gonna ace our notion
yeah, but I
interviews.
always I just ask almost like overly what did you learn? What would you do differently? Did you, if you went back and did it again, what would you do the same? What were the mistakes you made? And I think if somebody is able to think about a project that they worked on, even one that was really successful, and still be able to extract a learning from it, um, even like the most basic of small tasks, if you're able to reflect on something that you learned from doing that, that shows that you have a kind of a learning mindset.
And, in this day and age with AI and vibe coding, are
Yeah.
you like, have you changed anything about your hiring process? Is that something someone needs to demonstrate that they can use or can't use or something?
So yeah, we've changed which skills we looked for. So we have a prompting interview for
Oh,
anybody that's going to
interesting.
be doing prompting. And it's really funny. We've got to continue iterating on that interview because the new model comes out and then the prompting is not as hard because the
Ah,
model's just better. And so it's like this kind of fun constant game. And then in the prompting interview, again, it's like you're looking for the curiosity. If the model doesn't get it right on the first try, do you get like paralyzed? Or are you able to iterate on it? So that's a new interview that we've kind of replaced. Um, but the rest of the principles are quite similar. You're looking again for that growth mindset. On the technical side, for engineers, looking again for can you think rigorously and robustly about a problem? Um, and I think you can measure that regardless of if it's like an AI assisted code or just sort of a thought exercise.
do you guys do like project-based sort of interviews or testing?
So we don't do like a come do a project with us, although I think that that's probably the absolute best way you can tell if someone's a good fit. We'll do take home assignments, especially our intern class all went through take home assignments.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And how do you test for personality?
Mhm.
Like, I don't know, how easy someone is to work with or hard or challenging.
Yeah, again, to me, it also really comes down to that learnability and that growth mindset. Is this somebody who can, when being given a problem, have humility for the problem and not necessarily just think that they know all the answers? Um, and uh, and again, I just test that by asking, what did you learn? What did you learn? What did you learn? And I find that if somebody is curious and has respect for the difficulty of the problem, they usually can get along with everyone. But if someone comes in with an overly rigid way of thinking, that's often the source of problems. But I think conflict is good. So I don't necessarily need to be hiring somebody that agrees with me 100% of the time, but they
Mhm.
just have to be able to listen and really mull over a new way of thinking.
hmm Now, a lot of these folks in this webinar are running startups. So, budgets are probably a little bit tighter than certainly at Google when I was there as well. Or, cachet, right? Like Google and now Notion both have great brands that people know and love. How do you win somebody over, like after you've decided you want to work with them, especially if you're competing with like a Google, a big
Yeah.
behemoth?
Yeah. Um, every single person is different. And so I think the way, and this is, I think, especially useful in a startup environment where you're competing with like well-known brand names or even higher comp. Um, you have the time and the like person to person capacity to find out what does the other human on the other side actually want? Are they looking for autonomy? Are they looking to try something new? Are they looking to be working really closely with a group of people? Are they looking to be in person? Are they like really understanding their needs? And then really just talking to that specifically and like courting that side of them, and you can give them a really personal experience, which a big company can never do. And so we've tried as much as we can at Notion to really, really hold on to that. I'll talk to every single candidate we give an offer to. I usually talk to multiple times just to try and figure out what is it that you're actually interested in. Also, no hard feelings if Notion's not the place for that. That's okay. But making it personal.
Yeah. I mean, I know that sales is often a dirty word, especially in engineering, but it sounds like that is what you are doing. You're catering
Yeah.
your pitch to,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. Okay, interesting. And like, do you guys measure your sales wins like on the candidates you do offer?
Yeah, we definitely measure our overall accept rate. I can still probably list out every person by name that I extended an offer to that said no. There's like a special a special place in my heart for them, and maybe some learnings from there too. Um, yeah, and I think a lot of I make two adjustments from the rejections. Um, One of them is just, was I looking for the right person? So maybe that like role setup or the people I was talking to was actually the wrong fit. And then also like changing the pitch. So maybe somebody was like, I don't believe in Notion. So then I'm like, okay, now I know that in my first conversation with you, I have to show my genuine excitement for Notion's business. Um,
Yeah.
and like making sure to incorporate those learnings, especially for things that people get wrong earlier in the process.
And I think that is absolutely key because when I often hear founders say, "Oh, I can't win this candidate or that candidate," there's always something, an angle to sell on. If it's comp, then you're probably selling on the wrong angle.
Yeah.
But okay, so actually, this is a good reminder to everyone because I'm starting to see questions in the chat. Definitely, this is meant to be interactive, so throw your questions in the chat and I will pull from them. So actually, I'm going to take the first question here. Noah's asking, how do you do the prompting interview questions? And,
Yeah.
and Noah says that actually you're the first person who's mentioned this.
Oh,
So this is
really?
pretty cool.
Um, without giving away what we ask, um, basically we took a problem that we genuinely had to solve with prompting. Um, and we just kind of broke it down into something that fits into an hour. We just like tactically we have our own kind of separate API key that we'll give the candidates to use. So there's a little coding involved as well. Um, but yeah, it's a real problem because as you probably all know, there's a ton of prompting that you have to do in your day to day. And so there's many to choose from that we just bring to the interview process.
Cool. All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit. So now you have a team of people whom you've hired. How do you organize your team and run sprints? I guess first question at Notion, are you guys, all in person? You guys have wonderful headquarters, or do you have some
Yeah.
distributed folks, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we're all in person. And I actually um prepared something a little small to answer this question just to show rather than tell
Okay.
how we run the team. So give me a second, let me share my screen. So the way that I organize the team, process-wise, we have a daily stand-up. That's it. We don't do anything fancy in terms of big process. And then we organize our stand-ups to be around a project. And so I try and keep it really, really loose because as you all know, with AI, it's kind of impossible to predict what new capabilities are going to get unlocked. And so we sort of swarm into these sort of tiger teams all around a specific project or feature we're trying to build. And our stand-up process is quite simple. People list out their updates ahead of time. We'll read through them asynchronously. Maybe there's something to talk about, maybe there's not. If there is something to talk about, then we'll add a discussion topic. Um, and oftentimes there's no discussion topics, and that's fine, and we'll end early. And then at the beginning of the week, we'll come up with goals for that week, stick it in a synced block, And then usually it's around whatever prototype we're trying to build or feature we're trying to launch. And then we'll take the goals for the week because it's a synced block. I can then have this synced block live in many different places. So if like my manager asks me what's going on, I can literally just put in the sync block and we can see the progress of what's happened that week. And then you heard it here first. We have a new feature launching this week, hopefully.
Oh, cool.
We have revamped AI blocks. And so I don't know if any of you have used an AI block in Notion, um, but we just reskinned it to give you the ability to ask questions that pulls from information, not just from your current page,
Oh, awesome.
from other places. And so, for example, if you have a particular Slack channel where all of your updates are, you can select that channel specifically. So we've been using that in our stand-ups every day to basically pull from Slack and Notion what each person works on. And so like this whole section gets automated, which is pretty fun.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are big users of Notion ourselves at Hustle Fund. I think along similar lines, if people are looking for ideas with our investment team meetings, we don't quite have a stand up in the way that maybe an engineering team might, but we are notoriously awful at trying to update stuff in a centralized location, but people use Slack. And so our workflow is set up such that we can just actually type in pound topic and then add the whatever, and it gets pushed to Notion so that it is in that centralized table for our meeting. So that's another way if your team is not so organized, like perhaps the Notion team is, that there are ways you can get things organized in Notion without everybody needing to
Yeah.
be sort of a buttoned up person.
And that's what's like so cool about AI is that you can be it's like very amenable to my kind of chaotic disorganized mind because as long as the information exists somewhere
Yeah.
AI can find it. And so it's really enabled me in maybe not so good of a way to be more disorganized than I used to be. But it's quite convenient.
Yeah, that's super cool, and I'm excited to see that launch later this
Yeah.
week. So when you have this team stand up, it's in person, it sounds like.
Yeah.
How much time do you spend on stuff? Is it like rapid fire? Like what does this look like?
Yeah. So we optimize for kind of fast decision making for the most part. And so there's kind of two parts of that. One is trying to make the stand-ups the time to make decisions and to talk through issues. And that's part of why it's so important to have it every day so that you don't get if you come across some problem in the afternoon, you don't have to wait until like next week's meeting to figure it out. You can just solve it tomorrow or even later today, depending on what time of day it is. So I'd say we really, really optimize for decision making. Um,
Hmm.
and we're also try the reason we have that like lightweight synced block is that our goals change. You try something, it doesn't work. You have to abandon that direction and go in a different direction. And I found the more classical like 2 week sprint planning to just be too rigid for the pace
Hmm.
at which things move and the pace at which you discover okay, this architecture does or doesn't work for the capabilities of this new model. Um, and so I think like extreme fluidity and extreme flexibility is what I'm trying to organize around. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's the like philosophy.
Yeah. I mean, I think that makes sense while you have everyone there just making quick decisions. What decisions do you think can be made async versus live? Like how do you parse through that?
Um, I think I maybe shouldn't say this too publicly, but I usually say ask forgiveness, not permission. And I anything async that doesn't have a lot of consequences, or that's we'll talk a lot about one-way doors versus two-way doors. So I'm trying to think of an example. In the AI blocks feature that I just showed you, we sort of went back and forth on like what kinds of blocks should be supported in and out of that AI block. And we actually decided asynchronously, you know what, we're just going to do the easy ones that don't require a lot of work. And then the harder ones, when users ask for them, that's when we're going to add them. Um, And that was an async decision. It's something that we could have agonized over a long bit, but it was like, okay, just take the easy, or the path with the least friction, because it's a one-way, it's a two-way door. Once you decide you can add more things later, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Um, but then synchronous decisions would be things like maybe changing the overall direction of the project. So, um, when we were building our enterprise search, having it connect to many, many different third parties, there's some decisions that impact the end-to-end latency of the whole
Mm,
system.
yeah.
And so there's that like quality speed trade-off. And so that actually we wanted a live discussion because if you're taking debt in one place, you want to make sure that it was worth it.
Yeah. Well, I guess like for these meetings and stuff, like it sounds like it's just a very limited number of meetings. Would you say that for your individual contributors, it's basically one this is the one meeting, or do they
Yeah.
have other meetings with other subgroups?
That's the goal. The goal is that they only so I attend many different stand-ups because there's many
Sure.
projects going on at one time. But the ideal is that as an IC, you are attending one meeting a day, maybe
Mhm.
a few others for like your one-on-one with your manager or your maybe there's some interviews. Um, but but globally, I want to give people as much maker time as they can
Yeah.
get.
Yeah. And how do you think about one-on-one meetings? Like how often do you meet with your reports?
Yeah. So it depends on the report. I try and just do whatever is most enabling for them. And so I have some who are like really asynchronous processors. And so I actually want to meet with them less often, but for longer, so that they can like come up with a list of like pre-thought through things that they want to talk through. I have other folks that require a human to talk to in order to get their ideas out. So I'll meet with them more often. Um, and so it really depends. But
What is sort of the range, like
yeah,
once a week or?
the range is I think for my leads, I'll meet once a week. For anyone that's working like deep on a project, I try not bother them, and so I'll do more closer to biweekly. But it like changes every month. I think, but like if there's anything you'll take away from this, it's flexibility. Some months, some quarters, some weeks. We do need to meet, we don't need to meet. We don't, I try not to be too rigid and okay, just because we did it like this, we have to keep going.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I love that you said earlier about how you have everyone come in essentially with a prepared mind with what they want to talk about. Do you have your one-on-ones do that as well? Like, hey, we're going to have the meeting if you are bringing something, or like, how do you think about that?
I start every single meeting with what's on your mind. Um, and sometimes there's like a long laundry list and we'll do breadth first. We'll write everything down and then we'll walk through it one by one. But sometimes they'll come in and I'll be like, you know what? I don't have anything top of mind. And then my next words are, okay, let's cancel. Um,
Yep.
I think like again, we're often too attached to, oh, there's this meeting on the calendar, I must have it. And I think that like it's really maybe bad to get trapped in that. Um I think there's a lot of meetings that actually are wonderful that don't have agendas ahead of time because you kind of come in with this problem that's burning and then you just want to talk about it and get it off your chest.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, again, it's like no rules, and really just being very nimble and adjusting to whatever project problem is top of mind. And sometimes I come with the problem as well. It's not just my reports that are coming with the problems.
Yeah. I think every company has a culture though. And so, even comparing Google to Notion, um, I guess how have you done things differently with regard to meeting live
Yeah.
between then and now?
Yeah. So this is maybe obvious in hindsight, but Notion is filled with like productivity nerds, right? Because we are all
Right.
excited about Notion as a product. And so things that I had a lot of trouble with at Google and Waymo as a manager, for example, just like getting people to write stuff down, getting people to
Mhm.
like document their tasks or their to-do lists. Um, I had this moment when I first joined Notion and I had my very first one-on-one with my very first new report. Um, and the day before, she sent me a doc that was like our one-on-one doc with an agenda. And I was shocked to discover that like somebody else was as much of a productivity nerd as I was back at Google because I was kind of the unique snowflake there. Um, and so that to me has been the biggest paradigm shift is that you're filled with like-minded people who like writing things down and like organizing their thoughts, which is kind of a breath of fresh air from your maybe typical um, person that doesn't think about it.
Yeah. With all these AI tools, and I think I probably have 20 note takers of my own going on in the background right now, like what I guess has that changed anything about how you guys work or do you guys integrate with any of the note-taking tools or how do you
Um,
think about that?
yeah, so I'll just show you one more time. One of the things that we also do in all of our stand-ups, and actually I do this in every one-on-one too, is meeting notes.
Oh,
And
okay.
so if you all don't mind, I'll get to start this. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do this right now. I have to update my Notion app. But basically we have meeting notes that we'll take at every single meeting. And that's been amazing to kind of free your mind to actually be engaged in the conversation, and have the meeting notes transcribe and record for anything that you forgot. I've also found it really useful in interviews. I get to pay attention to the person and the conversation, and not worry so much about like what exactly happened. And the notes that I take are actually notes about the candidate, things like what is it that they're most interested in, or most excited about, so that I can use that for that self chat later. Also things like observations about them. And so I don't need to take notes on what's actually happened. So I think that's been a huge quality of life improvement for me.
Yeah. Hemant and Kartik are both asking about, are there other tools that you use in terms of managing your teams that may not have existed even a couple of years ago or 5 years ago that you find very useful?
Yeah. I think one of the like kind of benign things that or maybe like manual but benign and frustrating things that managers have to do is like there's like checklists that you have to do for every single person on the team, of like, okay, did I do a performance review? Did I give
Mm,
them feedback this quarter? Did I check in on their well-being? Are they getting enough
yeah.
vacation? Like just lists like that. That have always been really manual to make, but with AI, I have a single database of all the people in my team, like directs and indirects. And I can very quickly just generate a new checklist with like some of the metadata that I need, or like, okay, what if I want to do a checklist just for the people that I have in New York? And that's been really small, but a huge quality of life improvement. And I'd say I have probably half a dozen of those style of things. It was really funny I think it was a couple weeks ago. Um, I was like, I'm so tired at the end of every day. And I realized it's because I had no more grunge work to do. That like the grunge work is like a little bit of a reset for your brain,
Uh-huh.
because AI was like doing the first pass of every one of my documents, like doing a lot of the like data munging for me. I didn't have that like zone out time anymore. It
Uh-huh.
was just on all day.
Yeah.
It's
You're
like,
just doing all the hard work.
yeah, I was like, I'm tired now. So it's a good problem to have, but it's interesting.
Yeah. Paul asks if you have set up any agents for any of your workflows.
Um, yeah, so a lot of it is just like data entry and task
Mm.
management. So triaging feedback. We also have like a lot of internal prototypes that we've built, that we still continue to use and will hopefully push out. But yeah, triaging incoming feedback comes in, send it to the right person, to the right product, to the right
Mm.
bugs database. My like favorite. I really like the dumb, simple ones. Is like we have a travel and out of office tracker bot that
Oh
somebody
yeah.
posts in Slack, like, hey, I'm sick today. And then it just files it away in our team calendar. And then I can go look to see, wait, okay, is this person actually in office or not in office? And it's more reliable than their calendar or like any kind of manually curated thing. So I'd say,
That's a good one. I'll have to copy that one,
yeah,
actually.
it's like the really, really small things that actually I think have a big impact. And then there's the obvious large things of like information that you couldn't find before that now you can find, or docs that would have taken hours to write that now take 10 minutes. Um, but I think those are like maybe those are more obvious.
Yeah, no, those are cool. You had mentioned that you have teammates in New York. How do
Yeah.
you work with remote folks?
Yeah. Um, I always think about like what's the value of having a cross geography team. And the biggest one is that you get to actually have a larger like work day, if that makes sense. So like for example, they're able to take things in the morning and people
Right.
can take things in the evening. Um, but in terms of working remotely, I think about kind of two different angles of it. One is just organizationally. How can I organize the projects and the people on the different projects so that it's most effective? And part of the value of having a team in New York and a team in SF is that I also have multiple skill sets there. So I have some infra people in New York and I have some infra people in SF. I have some ML people in both places. I have some product thinkers, front engineers in both places. Some of these are like single people that can do all of it. Um, and so you think for a given project, for example, that the AI block that I just demoed, there's one component of it that is okay, being able to search across all of our third-party sources, and then there's another part of it that is UI. And I don't need to have this be a cross geography project because I can have it be a project. This one happened to be fully in New York because I had an infra person there and a product person there, and they worked together on this. And so that's kind of how I see the value of you get a lot of different skill sets, but you can bring them together in a smaller geography.
In
Um,
terms of sort of the logistics, like let's say you have a stand-up that has a somebody from New York, do you just like kind of dial them in? And I don't know,
Yep.
in the old days we had this problem of I can't hear you or whatever. Like, does that
Yeah.
exist still? Like how do you kind of integrate them with a live meeting?
Yeah, we because we're in person in both locations, so it's like
Okay.
two conference rooms on Zoom or on Google Meet. And I think actually the fact that a lot of it is async because we'll come in ahead of time with our updates
Mm-hmm.
and then come up with the discussion topics in the first 5 minutes of the meeting. That helps a lot with the like video coordination. Um but um but yeah, I also think having everything happen in one meeting, and that meeting is usually like early afternoon for New York, late afternoon for or late morning, early morning for San Francisco. Because everything happens in that one meeting, it means that you don't have as much like coordination overhead because all you have to do is be in that one place, and so you know that all the decisions get made there.
Mm-hmm. And Walter asks, like, how do you motivate engineers to prioritize certain products or, other things that are more experimental? How do you guys kind of set that up at Notion?
Yeah. So I have to admit, I lied about the one meeting every day on Fridays. We don't have a single stand-up per team. We have a single demos meeting.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's
And
cool.
so that is our it's kind of like a show and tell across all the different AI efforts that are going on. And I do try and do a lot to celebrate, especially celebrate failures in that
Mhm.
and celebrate experiments. And so I think that's the biggest thing is really making, if you want someone to work on experiment or something experimental, it has to be safe for them to not succeed. And this is something I learned deeply from my time at Waymo. There was like, when you're working on something that's maybe impossible,
Yeah.
it has to be safe to fail. And so it's the same idea, same concept. Um, and so I'd say that's the biggest thing. But then it's also like you kind of get all the way back to that hiring process. If you know that the team right now is made up of folks that are very, very experimental and there's nobody that likes to productionize it and actually do the final, 10%, well, then you're going to look in your hiring process for somebody who's naturally more excited about that productionization skill set. If you have the opposite, then you kind of will match it with the opposite. And so I see it also as when you're hiring for skills, you're also hiring for personality in the sense of what is it that person naturally likes doing, because trying to fit a square peg in a wrong hole in a round hole is just like not going to work. So you get the people that are naturally motivated by the stuff that needs to get done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that Demos Friday idea. Do you think on some level it kind of creates, I don't want to say accountability. I don't want this to sound Machiavellian, but like, when I think about my time running a global accelerator prior to Hustle Fund, there was something to be said about when everybody every week kind of shows what they've worked on. There's a little bit of this, not quite competition, but this sort of competition, pressure, inspiration, whatever you want to call it, such that people are constantly putting their best work forward. And they've even run studies showing that once you lose that, people kind of just like
Mhm.
fall the wayside a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
how do you think about that? Does that come into play here?
Yeah, so I try and keep the demos really casual. So like I will often demo a doc I wrote with AI.
Mm,
And so I keep it very, yeah, very casual. I'm trying to remember. I demoed 2 weeks ago. There was like a bunch of news on various things that, I mean, this happens every week, but various things that had been launched, and I used our research mode to just put together a doc, and it took me a few minutes. And I just shared that doc, and that was my demo. And so it's like you don't have to build a big thing.
mm,
When I know that somebody worked on something, like we deleted part of our code base, that was a huge win for tech
mm.
debt. Um, I voluntold that person to demo their pull request. And so I think it's about making sure that the things that get demoed are still like a little curated to be more casual, and then that keeps the environment um, uh, kind
Like
of
less pressure.
less pressure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's great. And as a sort of side note, we've used Notion to generate a lot of, I guess, the pages that you need to generate as a company. So like our company handbook, our vacation policy, or whatever, all those things were generated by Notion. It's actually quite good.
yeah.
So let's dig into some more questions. And actually, I'd wanted to ask you about sort of along the lines of success. Like, how do you know, evaluate whether a project is successful? And especially since a lot of things are experimental, they may not be. So how do you kind of, I don't know, grade, so to speak, work? Like, and how do you set expectations on how things will be graded?
Yeah. Um, so if I think about people and products a little bit separately, let me talk about products first. For a product, I think or a feature within the product to be successful, we want it to be useful first and foremost. And we want it to address a use case that is frequent. And like frequency is mostly about ordering. Um, so for example, for AI blocks that I just demoed, um, we originally were like, okay, what if you could use an AI block to um, generate an onboarding guide? And I was like, okay, that's nice, but that happens like once in a person's experience. And so very quickly we pivoted to thinking about status updates, because that's a daily,
Hmm.
weekly, monthly use case. And so that's how that like frequency angle comes into effect. And then valuable, which usually is about time saving. So useful, frequent, valuable. Um, and kind of those are the questions top of mind every single day, every single week as we're building the product. Um, and kind of the ultimate nail in the coffin or sign of success is, do we as a team internally use it? So we're really lucky in that we get to use our own product and build an intuition for that. So it's on the product side, and we've shut down things internally that's had like one really excited user, but it's like, it's not good enough. The first version of AI blocks was actually that, because it didn't pull information from the rest of the workspace. It was just like it was useful, but like not that useful. And so like kind of raising the bar and making sure that it's high enough, if that makes sense. Um, and then on the people side, I think it's about finding like a perfect match of person to problem. I think too often somebody is like failing to solve the problem, and it's not because they're not good, it's because it's the wrong problem. Um,
Mhm.
and so again, it's like thinking about that personality type. If it's somebody who's a really rigorous, exhaustive thinker and is able to think of every single edge case, and then you put them on a project that's super greenfield and it's like go be creative and figure something out, they're not going to succeed in that space. But if you give them a like gnarly problem with a lot of edge cases and a lot of things to think about, then they'll actually do much better. And so on the people side, I see it as let me figure out what you are really, really good at, um, and find problems that fit. It's not always possible, but that's the goal.
One of the common problems, and especially I can relate to it when I was running my startups, is you don't know if you'll find product market fit. And so people build some stuff and then no one wants to use it. I mean, Notion has product market fit, but I imagine not every feature you ship out has
Right.
product market fit. There's always sort of this thing of like, oh, I spend all this time working on this, whatever it is, and then now we have to get rid of it. How do you kind of handle the communications and the morale and even the metrics that are needed to keep a feature at Notion?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a story of when this happened. It's maybe a year ago. I don't know if you've all used like the buttons inside of Notion, an automation setup. So we were like, it would be so cool if you could click a button and it triggers an AI action. So we built it. We built an AI action from the manual button trigger, and we thought it was going to be like the future of everything. Um, and we built it, we shipped it to a beta group and saw like very small usage, like less than 1% of the people with access actually set it up. And then less than 1% of those actually got clicked on. So we're like, okay, something's not working. And one of the biggest reasons we took a step back, we're like, actually, okay, what would I put in that button? And we all were like, oh, we're not really sure.
Yeah.
And that was the sign. And so we shut down the project, we turned it off, we deleted the code, and it was not a huge morale hit because when we first took on the project, we knew that it might not succeed. And
Mm,
we also had a big long list of other ideas that we wanted to try. And so shutting that down was exciting because it meant that you got to go and sink your teeth into something new. Um, but I think having that example and sort of it's show not tell. You can't just say, don't be upset. You have to show that you yourself are excited and enthusiastic about the fact that you canceled it because now you get to go work on these other things.
yeah.
So it's a combo.
Adam asks, like, do you guys ever do, retros or debriefs on any of these projects and do you document them? What is sort of your process around sort of ending things?
Yeah, so any major launch, so like we had a big launch a few weeks ago. We'll do like a post-mortem, although like hopefully there's no mortem involved. But we'll do a retrospective after the fact. We'll talk about what went well, what went wrong, what do we want to learn for next time. One of the biggest learnings that we've had from the last one that we've used for the next launch was last year we coupled marketing spend to a launch date. And that meant that we had to make a huge number of compromises on the launch itself because we had already booked like podcasts and ad slots, which is maybe a luxury of a problem to have at a larger company, but it actually caused a lot of compromise in the product that we ended up launching. And so this time around, we had our launch date, and then product launch date, and then we had our marketing launch date a month later. Um, and that was thanks to the learning that we had from the previous launch. And it seems small, it's just a scheduling thing. But it meant that we didn't have to compromise as much. And so I'd say every major launch will have big learnings like that. And then also for the smaller things that we cancel, hopefully it's small that we canceled it because it means we caught it early. We'll post it probably write up a quick little doc about why. Like for example, with the button, we wrote up a quick little blurb about why, and then it's in our database. And now, if anybody asks Notion Q&A, hey, have we ever tried building AI buttons? That doc will show up and explain exactly why. So keep it lightweight, but documentation is useful.
hmm So we've talked about hiring, best practices in working with the team, meetings, etc., projects, and seeing them to the end. We have a bunch of other ad hoc questions,
Yeah.
so they're going to sort of be one-offs,
Right.
but there's a few people who want to know about how do you use databases in conjunction with Notion AI to help either augment the information or get information or stuff like that. Any tips or best practices that you can share?
Yeah, I'd say I, I try and keep the databases as specific as possible. So I think some of the failure modes that people will get themselves into is they'll try and have like a single database for every possible kind of artifact. And I think that makes it hard for the humans and harder for AI. Um, I do think that's only a short-term limitation. As models get better, it'll get easier for AI. Um, but I think the more structured and consistent the data, again, the easier it is for both the humans and AI. I'm most excited though about we're cooking up some tools to make it easier to interact with databases because I think
Hmm.
right now AI is I'll give our own AI like a C plus or a B minus in how we act with databases, and I think that there's a lot more that can be unlocked, especially with the recent model capabilities. So I'm very excited to do more.
Oh, very cool. And how do you measure like the impact of AI tools on your team? Have you seen like productivity go up in any sort of measurement?
Yeah, so I it just feels faster. I can't really put my finger on how, but a maybe concrete example is I had a new person join the team, kind of fresh out of college, who had never done front end before and had done some like toy projects here and there, um, and got thrown into working on research mode. We had 2 months before launching, and we decided to completely change how our animations worked to make it like nicer and kind of more polished. And this engineer, never done animations, rarely done front end, used AI to rebuild the whole thing.
Oh,
And
cool.
they had a mentor work with them who did understand how it works. And it took something I would have expected a seasoned engineer to take maybe even a few weeks to flesh out. Took less than a week to get the first version working.
Oh, nice.
And, like, that's just awesome, that, like, a person without the specialized knowledge can make so much progress in a short amount of time.
hmm What is a top reason that new hires might underperform? Like, are
Mm.
there things you've seen?
Yeah, I think, it's like there's, like, a Goldilocks zone of, not asking enough questions and
Mm,
asking too many questions and not trying to figure it out yourself. And I think trying to figure out where for you and the team around you that happy zone is, those are the people that do the best. Um, I used to think that there are two kind of learners. There's learners that learn by learning everything and then applying it, and then there's learners that learn by doing. And I think in this day and age, in the industry that we have, and things are moving so quickly, it's impossible to read a bunch of stuff and then execute. You have to learn by doing. And so I've actually changed my coaching strategy, and I try and give a new hire a quick win at the beginning and just get them into the learn by doing mindset as fast as possible.
Do you know if there's sort of like a go, no go point where someone is working out? Like, do you just know, oh, after a month, is it not working out?
Yeah, I'd say if you're not feeling like, oh my God, this person is awesome, um, a month in, that's probably a red flag.
hmm
Or a yellow flag. And
hmm
so either it's just not the right fit for what you need, or you've put them on a problem that isn't their strength.
hmm And so do you try to move them around or are you guys just like, eh?
Um, it depends. It depends on the person, their history, their context. I'll always try and adjust the problem first and see, okay, if I let me figure out what you're really good at and put you on something that plays to your strengths. Um, but if it's not working, have the frank conversation and say, listen, this isn't working, and I think it's usually the other person is relieved.
Mm-hmm. You had mentioned that conflict is good. Like, how do you manage that? Like, and what kind of conflict are we talking about? Like, at what point is it too much conflict versus, you know, direct transparency about a product feature or something?
Yeah. So, conflict is good, especially when two people come in with a different way of thinking. Um, I'm trying to think of an example. Okay, so for example, we had an internal conflict within the team of like, how long is too long for an AI session, AI back and forth to take? Like thinking about what are the latency metrics we actually want to hit. And on one side of the equation was quality of no, you need to like we're going to give a terrible answer to this question if we don't let the model ask like follow-up questions to itself to really dig into something. And then on the other hand, it was like, okay, but if users have to wait, they're just going to go to a different page and like never get the answer in the first place. So who cares how good the answer is if nobody waits? um, and there was this tension for a long time, like a week, within the team of like, what do we do? And then from that bore research mode, where we said, actually, what if this is a real tension that users themselves face? What if we let users decide? And so we didn't have to actually resolve it by like picking one or the other. We actually evolved the product because of this conflict to give people like a try harder but slower mode and
Oh,
fast a fast and simple mode, which is a
oh,
pattern
interesting.
that the industry is following as well. But that like you needed that conflict to arrive at that new solution.
Hmm. Can you talk a little bit about your org model? Like, are people based on teams of projects, or where do PMs fit in versus eng leads, et cetera?
Yeah, so the theme of this all is that it's very fluid, and it's so that we can adapt as new ideas come to be. But the structure right now is more organized around the specializations. So there's like infra and platform, there's the kind of model, ML and prompting, and then there's the product engineers, which are more front end leaning. And so the teams are kind of loosely organized there because it's too many people for me to manage directly. Um,
How many direct reports do you have, if I might ask?
I think I have 15 right now.
Oh, 15.
Um,
Wow. Okay.
yeah, so I have two managers for the model um, group and the platform group. And then I manage all the product engineers directly. And it works well because most projects are either heavy model quality or heavy infra. And so I'll take a product engineer or two and pair them with somebody on one of those teams.
Hmm.
Um, but I think the org structure is less important than the clarity of the flying formation. So where you report to and who you report to is useful for like career and understanding growth. But what's actually most important is, okay, for this project, who is the go-to person for it? Am I working on project A or project B? And so every couple months, or sometimes more often than that, I'll send out a like, here is our flying formation. And it's got the list of explorations that we're doing for each one. There's a single accountable person. And that's the most important piece is that there's one person, not like four.
Hmm. And there are a bunch of questions sort of along these lines of, to what extent do you let AI do a lot of the work versus people, you know, I guess like, and these are all very vague questions. So how do you think about as AI becomes more prevalent in workflow, like, to what extent you guys rely on it, to what extent you have sort of a human in the loop checking things, stuff like that.
Um, I think the principle of um, moving to less of being the writer and more of being the editor is like the journey we're all on. And so I think it's just a matter of for this particular automation, um, where in the process do I need to like insert the human? Because the human is going to be somewhere in there. Otherwise, like what's the point of having this automation? Um, and so the dumber the AI model, probably earlier in the process you've got to be, or maybe the harder the problem, the earlier in the process you have to be, but the simpler the solution. So my like travel updater bot that understands when people is out of office and sick and updates the calendar. Um, I only edit that workflow when I'm looking at it and I know that it's wrong, but I just kind of assume that it's right most of the time, and that's fine. It's the stakes are low.
Yeah, right.
Um, but I used AI for to draft my first version of my performance reviews about a month ago, and there is like heavy editing because if you get
Mm.
that wrong, it has some implications. And so
Right.
so it's about like matching the stakes and the complexity of it. And I'm assuming it's going to change and we're all going to move from writer towards editor for every single
Right.
workflow over time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us to talk about how you hire, manage, and run projects at Notion. We look forward to the launch later this
Yeah.
week. And thank you all for all of your questions and for coming to this session. We'll end you a minute early or so. So thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. The recording will be sent out soon. All right. Take care. Bye.